This is the greatest rivalry in sportswear history. Two brothers from the same small German town built a shoe empire together and then destroyed their family trying to tear it apart. They died without ever speaking to each other again. They were buried at opposite ends of the same cemetery because that is what they requested. Two brothers who once shared a workbench, a home, a dream, could not even share a patch of ground after death. This is the story of Adolf and Rudolf Dassler, whose breakup accidentally created two of the biggest sportswear companies on the planet, Adidas and Puma. And it starts, like a lot of family stories, with shoes. Rudolf Dassler arrived on March 26, 1898. 2 years later, on November 3, 1900, his younger brother Adolf followed. Everyone called him ADI. Their father earned a living in a shoe factory, and the family produced homemade slippers on the side, which meant shoes were in the blood from the start. But the old man wanted different futures for his boys. Adi was supposed to become a baker, and Rudolf leaned toward becoming a policeman. Neither path lasted long. When Adi returned from World War I, he built a small shoemaking operation in his mother's laundry room, driven by an idea that was genuinely original for its time. Athletes in different sports needed different shoes, and specialized footwear could actually improve performance. Rudolf, the older and more outgoing of the two, joined the business a few years later. Where Adi operated as the quiet inventor, Rudolf thrived as the charismatic salesman, and that combination turned out to be a perfect fit. By 1924, they had formally established Gebrüder Dassler Schuhfabrik, the Dassler brothers' shoe factory. In 1925, the operation employed about a dozen workers, turning out roughly 50 pairs a day, everything from leather soccer boots with nailed studs to track shoes with hand-forged spikes. Their first real breakthrough arrived at the 1928 Olympics in Amsterdam, where German distance runner Lena Radke won gold in the women's 800 meters wearing Dassler shoes and set a world record in the process. That confirmed the concept. The moment that changed everything, though, sat 8 years in the future. Now, before we get to that moment, there is something important to address. In 1933, both Adolf and Rudolf Dassler joined the Nazi Party. This was not unusual for German businessmen at the time. Many joined for commercial access or social pressure, but that does not make it insignificant. It is a complicated part of their story, and it comes back later during the denazification proceedings after the war. Berlin hosted the 1936 Summer Olympics, and Adolf Hitler intended the Games as a showcase of what he called Aryan supremacy. Adi Dassler carried a very different agenda. For him, Berlin meant a chance to put his shoes on the world stage. Armed with a suitcase full of hand-forged running spikes, Adi walked into the Olympic Village and approached an American sprinter named Jesse Owens. Owens came from nothing, the son of a sharecropper, the grandson of a slave. And here was Adi Dassler offering this black American athlete a pair of custom shoes. That deal is widely cited as the first sponsorship of a male African American athlete. Owens loved them. The shoes featured long hand-forged spikes and resilient leather, and according to reports, he declared that he would either wear these shoes or no shoes at all while competing. He wore them. And he won 4 gold medals: the 100 meters, the 200 meters, the long jump, and the 4x100 meter relay, all in Dassler shoes, all in front of Adolf Hitler, who left the stadium rather than congratulate him. Owens himself put it simply, "I wanted no part of politics. I wasn't running against Hitler. I was running against the world." Sales for the Dassler brothers reportedly hit 200,000 pairs per year after Berlin, which meant the laundry room operation had turned into a real company. And that is when World War II arrived and pulled everything apart. During the war, the Dassler factory stopped making athletic shoes and started producing military equipment, including boots and, reportedly, components for a shoulder-launched anti-tank weapon called the Panzerschreck. By 1943, the Dassler factory was the only sports shoe company still operating anywhere in Germany. And here is where the family drama takes over. Both brothers, along with their wives and children, were living under the same roof, and tension kept building. Adi's wife Kathy and Rudolf's wife Friedel clashed constantly. Personality conflicts, political disagreements, and a growing suspicion between the two households saturated daily life. Then came the incident that, depending on who you ask, cracked the relationship beyond repair. During an Allied bombing raid around 1943, Adi and his family rushed into a bomb shelter already occupied by Rudolf and his family, and as Adi entered, he reportedly said, "The dirty bastards are back again." He meant the Allied bombers. Rudolf heard it as an insult aimed at him and his family. Think about that for a second. One sentence, probably mumbled in the dark during an air raid, and it may have changed the entire history of sportswear. The exact wording varies from source to source, and some accounts actually attribute the line to Rudolf with Adi misunderstanding. None of that matters, because the results stayed the same. A misunderstanding in a bomb shelter during a war became one of the most consequential moments in the history of sportswear. What followed the war only deepened the wound. Both brothers faced denazification proceedings. Remember, they had both joined the Nazi Party in 1933. During Adi's appeal hearing, Rudolf reportedly inserted statements claiming that Adi had organized weapons production for his own personal profit. A longtime Communist Party member testified on Adi's behalf, saying he had never been involved in political activities, and Adi was eventually reclassified as a Mitläufer, a follower, regaining control of the firm in February 1947. Rudolf, on the other hand, remained convinced that Adi had denounced him to the Allied forces, leading to Rudolf's conscription and brief imprisonment. Whether that accusation held any truth did not matter. Rudolf believed it, and belief was enough. By 1948, the damage could not be undone. Working together was out of the question. Living together was impossible. The partnership was finished. After more than 2 decades of building a business side by side, Adolf and Rudolf Dassler shut down the Dassler brothers' shoe factory in 1948 and walked away from each other. Rudolf gathered his supporters and moved across the Aurach River to the south side of Herzogenaurach, where he launched a new company initially called Ruda, short for Rudolf Dassler. That name did not stick. He switched it to something that sounded more athletic, Puma. Adi stayed put at the original factory by the train station and held on to about 2/3 of the employees, mostly the technicians and product developers who preferred his focus on innovation over Rudolf's sales-first mentality. Registration for his new company came in 1949 under the name Adidas, a combination of Adi and Dassler. And that is when he needed a way to make his shoes instantly recognizable, so he experimented with colored reinforcement straps on the sides, tried different numbers, and settled on 3. He bought the 3-stripe trademark from Finnish sports brand Karhu for the equivalent of €1,600 and 2 bottles of whiskey. Arguably, it was the greatest trademark deal in business history. The 3 stripes were born. The company split cleanly enough on paper, but the fracture didn't stop at the factory walls. It spread across an entire town. And now, here's where it gets wild. About 23,000 people lived in Herzogenaurach, and nearly everyone worked for one of the 2 companies, which meant the town itself cracked right down the middle. Separate butchers served each side, separate bakeries, separate bars, separate restaurants, separate barbers. If you wanted a haircut, you had to make sure the barber wore the right shoes first. Walking into a shop wearing the wrong brand could get you turned away. Not because they didn't have what you wanted, because of what was on your feet. Dating across company lines? Heavy disapproval. Marrying someone from the other side? Even worse. This was Romeo and Juliet, except instead of Montagues and Capulets, it was 3 stripes versus a leaping cat. Rudolf reportedly kept a basement stocked with free Puma shoes, and if a worker showed up at his factory in Adidas, he'd pull a pair from the stash and send the message loud and clear. Now here's my favorite detail in this entire story. Klaus Romold owned a century-old bakery in town. His parents always kept a pair of shoes from each brand in their car. Baker needed 2 pairs of shoes, just to sell bread. They'd pull over before each delivery, check which company they were heading to, and swap their shoes accordingly. That's the level of paranoia this feud created. Former Puma CEO Jochen Zeitz described the atmosphere in a CNBC interview. "When I started at Puma, you had a restaurant that was a Puma restaurant, an Adidas restaurant, a bakery. The town was literally divided." He compared it to East and West Berlin. Think about that. A wall through a country compared to a shoe feud through a town of 23,000 people. And this is where the story earns its most lasting image. Before striking up a conversation with anyone, residents would glance downward first, checking shoes, sizing up which side the other person belonged to. That reflex gave Herzogenaurach its nickname, the town of bent necks. Time magazine placed the Dassler brothers' feud in its list of the top 10 family feuds of all time, right alongside Cain and Abel and the Hatfields and McCoys. 2 shoemakers from a provincial Bavarian town ranked next to legends. While the town festered, the rivalry spilled out onto the world's biggest stages. Switzerland hosted the 1954 FIFA World Cup, and West German national team manager Sepp Herberger carried a personal grudge against Rudolf Dassler, which locked Puma out of any deal. Adidas filled the gap, supplying the team with boots featuring screw-in studs, a piece of technology nobody else offered. When the final arrived on July 4th at the Wankdorf Stadium in Bern, rain had soaked the pitch. The favored Hungarians, unbeaten in 4 years and fresh off an 8-3 demolition of West Germany in the group stage, struggled in their traditional fixed stud boots on the waterlogged field. The Germans, wearing Adi's screw-in studs, quickly switched to longer spikes designed for exactly these conditions. West Germany shocked the world and won 3-2, a result still known as the Miracle of Bern. Franz Beckenbauer later said, "Suddenly Germany was somebody again." For anybody who grew up in the misery of the post-war years, Bern was an extraordinary inspiration. The entire country regained its self-esteem. Adidas reaped a wave of international exposure that opened up the global market. That single tournament handed Adidas a lead over Puma that has held ever since. 6 years later, at the 1960 Olympics in Rome, the rivalry produced one of the wildest double crosses in sports. German sprinter Armin Harry took money from Rudolf Dassler to wear Puma in the 100-meter final, and he delivered, winning gold and becoming the first person to clock the 100 meters in exactly 10.0 seconds. What nobody expected was that Harry would lace up a pair of Adidas for the medal ceremony, trying to collect from both sides at once. That gamble failed, and both companies ended up furious with him. The biggest blow to the family, though, landed 10 years later, and it became known as the Pelé Pact. Before the 1970 World Cup in Mexico, the next generation entered the ring. Horst Dassler of Adidas and Armin Dassler of Puma, sons of Adi and Rudolf respectively, agreed that neither company would try to sign the most famous athlete in the world, Brazilian footballer Pelé. A bidding war, they decided, would bleed both sides dry. Armin Dassler broke that agreement. Puma signed Pelé. Millions of viewers tuned in to watch the World Cup final between Brazil and Italy. And then, just before kickoff, with the whole world watching, Pelé bent down to tie his shoes. It looked routine, a player adjusting his laces. Nothing to see here. Except it was carefully staged. Every second of that gesture was designed to make sure the cameras captured his Puma shoes. That moment is widely considered one of the first instances of deliberate product placement in sports broadcasting. Brazil won the tournament, and from Puma's side, the whole operation qualified as a stroke of marketing genius. From the Adidas side of the family, it amounted to an unforgivable betrayal, one that snuffed out whatever slim chance of reconciliation still existed. Rudolf Dassler died in 1974, and Adolf followed on September 6, 1978. The two never reconciled. Not once. Both brothers specifically requested that their graves sit as far from each other as possible, and the town obliged. They occupy opposite ends of the Herzogenaurach cemetery. The damage spread well beyond the two of them. After the split, their mother Paulina chose Rudolf's side, living with Rudolf's wife Friedel, who cared for her for the rest of her life. Their sister Marie backed Adi and reportedly never forgave Rudolf because she believed his actions led to the death of her sons. 1 billion Deutschmarks in annual sales and 17 factories. That is what Adidas looked like by the time Adi died. But the family's grip on both companies was already slipping. By the late 1980s, both sides had sold out. Adi's son Horst sold Adidas to French industrialist Bernard Tapie. Rudolf's sons Armin and Gerd offloaded their 72% stake in Puma to a Swiss company. The Dassler family era was over. And here is the cruel twist. While both companies burned energy fighting each other, poaching athletes, filing lawsuits, and dividing their hometown, a company called Nike rose quietly across the Atlantic. Founded by Phil Knight in 1964, Nike grew methodically while the Dassler brothers fought. Neither Adidas nor Puma noticed the threat from Oregon until it was too late. Nike overtook them both and never looked back. Decades after the brothers died, time did what they could not. In 2004, Rudolf's own grandson Frank Dassler joined Adidas. He had grown up wearing Puma shoes, and he had served as president of Puma's U.S. subsidiary. His move felt almost sacrilegious to longtime Puma loyalists. One fan with a Puma tattoo on his arm called it a capital sin. Frank brushed it off, saying, "This enmity was many years ago. Now these things are history." He retired from Adidas in 2018, the last Dassler to leave either company. He died in 2020 at 64. Then there was the peace match. On September 21, 2009, the United Nations International Day of Peace, Puma CEO Jochen Zeitz called up Adidas and proposed something unthinkable: a friendly football game between the two companies. It was the first joint event since the split in the 1940s. 700 employees showed up. Teams were deliberately mixed, Adidas and Puma workers standing side by side. 60 years of division were symbolically put to rest on a football pitch. None of that corporate goodwill stopped the competitive instinct. In 2023, Bjorn Gulden, who had led Puma as chief executive for nearly a decade, walked across town and took the top job at Adidas. Puma's own boss was now running the crosstown rival. Feuding brothers no longer run these companies, their former executives do, swapping offices across a mile of Bavarian road. Adidas now pulls in roughly $25 billion a year in revenue. Puma brings in over 8 billion euros. Their combined market value runs in the tens of billions. Both remain headquartered in Herzogenaurach, about a mile and a half apart. Neither brother lived to see any of it reach this scale. And yet the rivalry itself is what made both companies great. Competition drove design forward, created the modern athlete endorsement, and invented sports marketing as we know it. Many historians credit the Dassler brothers' feud for turning sportswear into a multi-billion-dollar global industry. If they had simply gotten along, Gebrüder Dassler might have grown larger than Nike. Instead, two brothers spent so much energy fighting each other that neither noticed the real competition until the race was already lost. Adolf and Rudolf Dassler lie at opposite ends of the same cemetery in Herzogenaurach, exactly the distance they requested. The town once called the town of bent necks, where people checked your shoes before they would speak to you, has finally moved on. Bakeries serve everyone now, and the executives keep crossing that mile and a half of Bavarian road from one headquarters to the other, as if the river between them never existed. If this one kept your attention, subscribing is the best way to make sure the next one finds you.